Hey friends, Kambria Evans here, and today we are going to be talking about why EMDR works for almost everyone. And today we're talking about parents. As a parent of 7-year-old twins, as an EMDR consultant in California who works with parents in my private practice, this episode is going to have a soft spot in my heart. And the reason why I think EMDR works for parents in particular is going to be a little bit more expansive than how other people might conceptualize EMDR in general as a treatment modality for trauma. But when we break apart the definition of trauma, it's something that happened that shouldn't have happened, or it's an omission of something happening. It's something that didn't happen but should have happened. And I can think of no richer place than the planet of parenting when it comes to what happened that shouldn't have happened and what didn't happen that was supposed to happen. Whether or not we identify as somebody who has had trauma, whether or not we say EMDR is for trauma or more than trauma, beyond trauma, the point is that every single parent in the world, whether they identify as having had trauma or not, has absolutely had the experience where they thought something was supposed to happen and it didn't. Or something happened and it shouldn't have happened. Okay. And today I want to just map out whether you're a parent who's looking to get EMDR or looking just for some parenting tools to keep yourself sane. Or you're an EMDR therapist who has never really thought about EMDR for parents, has never really thought about using EMDR for something that's not trauma. I want to kind of expand your mind so that when you have parents in your practice, you can get them using EMDR immediately to help them understand how it can accelerate their processing of all the traumatic things that happen as parents. Okay? So here in California, I've had a private practice now for 7-8 years, and I've actually had a parent support program. And all this meant was that parents that were getting triggered by their kids, which by the way, y'all, is every parent, myself included, parents who are getting negatively triggered by their kids would have a place to come in my office and figure out what it was that was activating them, whether it was something that was currently happening in the present time that was happening but shouldn't be happening, or if something wasn't happening that should be happening, right? And then the next question we would ask was, okay, is this current thing linking to something from the past, right? From your childhood? Is it bringing up old memory networks? And is it lighting up your body in a way that feels dysregulated? Okay. This was the parenting program, the parenting support program that I have run now for 7 years. And I'm going to share with you a lot of the themes that I've found from this parenting program. And I'm also going to share a lot of the things I've learned in my own EMDR work as a parent, because I feel like it's going to help EMDR therapists help their clients better. And I feel like it's going to help parents understand that it should just be the default normal practice as a parent to have EMDR therapy, right? Just like we say that, parents should have a support community and parents should have, meditation and they should have yoga. Like I want to bring EMDR out of this private therapy room and into the lives of everyone that needs it the most. Top of the list, y'all, parents. It's parents, okay? So I want to think about what can happen for parents in EMDR therapy and what I've seen happen in my own therapy and in my office. So classic example is when a parent comes in and says, I'm being triggered by my kid or kids, and they're not doing anything wrong. Nothing's happening now that shouldn't be happening now. Meaning like my kids are just being kids. I have an observer part that can see, right? That my kids are just outside playing, but something gets triggered in me. Something dysregulates me and takes me out of my cognitive rational part of my brain and throws me into this like amygdala alarm And sometimes it's fear, sometimes it's rage, sometimes it's complete dissociation and freeze, right? But typically parents come and see me who are very high functioning and they say, there's a there. We have to figure out what it is. And I think what's really interesting is that we have so many things from the past as parents that are informing what's happening now. And what they don't tell you before you become a parent is that you don't know what's there until you're in the moment. You can read all the parenting books. You can go to all the talk therapy and think that you've mapped out your own childhood and what was there and what wasn't. But there's nothing like being with your children and having a trigger pop up that you just didn't expect to have happen. And what's amazing about triggers and what's amazing about the brain and the nervous system is that we don't ever know what's going to knock on that door. We don't ever know what that little piece of string is going to be that kind of leads us to some kind of a negative memory, a negative sense of self, a negative disturbing body sensation, a negative emotion. For some people, it can be just looking at their child's hand, seeing a small hand, being touched by a small hand, right, can flash someone back all the way to their own pre-verbal trauma when their hands were that small. When their hands were that small and having that sense that that small hand is linking us to something that's disturbing. And we might not even have a cognitive put together memory of it. It could just be something that ignites a freeze response in our body or an adaptation of rage, complete dissociation, right? So I've had the honor of working with so many parents in my practice as they figured out what strings were being activated and what were those leading to from the past that we could desensitize. And what's amazing about this work with parents is that I don't even need an actual memory or an actual image, right? All I really need is just an emotion and a body sensation and like a negative belief. Because oftentimes when we have these kind of strings and they're called pre-verbal trauma or disturbances that happen before we could really put together a comprehensive, cohesive memory, like something under 3 or something under 5 or even something under 7 years of age as we were growing up, right? Something that maybe the body even stored in kind of this bucket of dissociation, like, oh, that was disturbing. I'm going to put that over there. A lot of those things can kind of come from the back burner or maybe even the back storage closet all the way to the front burner. If we see our child's small hand or feel their small hand, if we hear a baby cry, hearing a baby cry can be very dysregulating. But for those of us parents who have had any kind of pre-verbal trauma or grew up in a house with lots of screaming and crying, there's disturbance around that now. Again, maybe not a clear memory, but something in our body is activated, right? EMDR is amazing for desensitizing these things, even if they're not clear to us. And I think this is where a lot of parents get really confused because they're like, is it normal to get this dysregulated when I feel overtouched or overstimulated by my kid's hands and wanting to be held? Is it normal to get this dysregulated when I hear my kid crying? Is this normal? Is so the question parents ask themselves when they're on this journey of parenthood. And I think that because parents are asking, is this normal, right? Is this how it's supposed to be? That's a huge indicator to us that parenting is full of trauma because, again, so much of what's happening, our mind and body isn't sure. Is something happening that's not supposed to happen? Or is there an omission of something happening that should be happening, right? And what our brain has to pull from is really interesting. So if you think about this, Francine Shapiro taught us, the inventor of EMDR, the past informs the present, and the past and present inform the future. So you think about these 3 prongs of time in EMDR. We have the past, present, and the future prong of time. And what's amazing is that your brain doesn't actually care about these constructs of time. To your brain, it's all the same thing, right? Because I'll tell you, from the minute you think about having a child or get pregnant with a child, your mind's already in the future, thinking about what it's going to be like, creating memories of things that haven't even happened yet. It's called our imagination. It's called our wishes and our dreams, right? And simultaneously, it's going back into the past, consciously or not, to understand how to do and how to understand and how to make sense of what's happening now. So we have all of this old curriculum from the past. And as parents, well, I'll speak to my personal experience. As a parent myself of 7-year-old twins, I read all the books. So I had that curriculum about what's supposed to happen. And then simultaneously, I had kind of this comparison of my friends with their kids or what I had seen about what a family was supposed to look like on movies and TV shows. So I had books, I had peers, I had books and TV shows. And then I had my own parents' way of parenting me. And we all have this, right? We all have a curriculum from our caregivers growing up. And what's interesting is that there's so much now in the mainstream about understanding our childhoods, which I think is beautiful. We understand, well, this happened and it was positive. Well, this happened and it was negative. So I'm not going to do it that way. And then our brain tries to fill in the gaps. Well, if I'm not going to do this, this, and this the way my parents did it because it was bad, or I want to do it better, then what curriculum am I filling in? Am I taking it from peers? Am I taking it from social media? Am I taking it from all the books, or am I taking it from movies and TV shows? The brain's always looking for where to take it, the curriculum from. And it's oftentimes doing this without us even realizing it. I'm going to give you an example of a personal example of how I was doing this as a parent and didn't even see it, right? I'll never forget, a friend said to me, she said, I think my twins were 2 or 3. And y'all parents know that as our kids grow, whatever you buy them for shoes or clothes, it's not going to fit them in like 4 weeks. So they were 2 or 3, and my kids, two kids, twins, had like 6 pairs of shoes each. They were barely really even walking that much, right? And my friend said to me, what's up with the shoes? Like, why do your kids have as many pairs of shoes as you do? And I had to think about that a little bit. And what was happening was my brain unconsciously was pulling from my past experiences about being a poor kid, right? It's traumatic to be a poor kid because you're not enough and because you don't have what the other kids have. And I had created what we call an overdeveloped adaptation. I had created a pendulum swing. Part of me had decided my kids are going to have what they need and then some, because I was the kid growing up who had to wear garage sale clothes, who had to wear hand-me-downs from an aunt that was like 15 years older than me. So nothing was fashionable. Nothing was new and nice and comfortable. Nothing was chosen. And so I had developed this overdeveloped adaptation to make sure that my kids had all the shoes. And this adaptation I had created as a new parent was created to make sure that my kids never felt the negative belief of I'm not enough or I don't belong, like I did oftentimes as, relatively to everyone else, a poor kid in my community. So as parents, we all develop these adaptations that pendulum swing us from what our parents did, right? Now, a lot of parents in the 80s spanked their kids, right? Now research tells us that this is incredibly a big no-no. We don't hit our kids. They don't learn what we want them to learn in the long run when we hit our kids. But parents back then, that was just more normal. So I can remember thinking, of course, I'm never, ever going to hit my kids, right? And then as a parent, my brain goes to, well, then how am I going to get them to listen to me? How do I learn how to do that, right? So our brain is, as parents, is always trying to figure out how to teach ourselves in real time, how to even differentiate where the curriculum is coming in from the past about how to do this. And we're simultaneously being triggered every single age of our kids. Again, I wish I had known this before I was a parent. Every single age of our kids, y'all, it's taking us back to that age of ourselves. So whatever was happening for us, for better or for worse, at that age, right? It's all coming up to the front burner as we're with our kids in the same age. So what that means is there are people that say, well, oh, this person's really good with babies, or this person's really good with teenagers, okay? And what I hear as an EMDR clinician is that person had a positive experience and positive sense of self at that age, most likely, because they're able to be with a kid that age. They're able to relate to a kid that age because they have a strong connection with themselves from that age. That's what I hear as an EMDR therapist. So it's so interesting. We're constantly trying to figure out, again, as parents, what's the right thing to do? What's normal? Our brain is trying to help us, and our brains and nervous systems actually love us. They're trying to be very, very helpful to us, and they're giving us information. They're giving us linkages. They're giving us these strings to learning to help us all the time as parents. And I think that when I work with parents here in my office, and when I've done my own EMDR work as a parent around parenting and motherhood, what I've noticed is that the EMDR targets that are most important to me are the ones that have the biggest gap between what's expected versus what is. And that even links into the future prong of time, right? Meaning one of my kids got a diagnosis in May of 22, and it really put a context around his behavior that I didn't understand before. And the diagnosis helped me understand how to parent him, because the way I'd been parenting him was not at all helpful for his neurodivergence. And a lot of the old curriculum that I had with kind of a more neurotypical brained kid wasn't going to work for him. And it wasn't working. And so here my brain is pulling in all this curriculum from parenting books and how I was raised and how my peers are doing it with their kind of more neurotypical kids. And here I am not even understanding as a highly trained therapist that I have a very neurodivergent kid here who needs to have things be very, very different in terms of sensory input, in terms of how I help him move or talk to him or help him understand himself. It was so different. It is so different from the way I understand myself and the way that my brain and body process information. And that experience of, is this normal? How can I not figure this out? Threw me into this negative belief of I am not enough, threw me into this state of freeze and overwhelm and just depression, because I just thought to myself, all the things I had imagined about me and this relationship and myself as a mom, all these things I had my brain made up in the future prong of time, all these memories that haven't even happened yet, they're not going to happen that way. They're not going to happen that way. And once we got into OT, once we got support services, and once I started reading the right books about how my kid thinks and understands the world, helped me understand the kind of mom I have to be for him. And it was not a default part of my brain that was available to me yet. I had to create all this new curriculum in real time. Very overwhelming, very stressful, very, very traumatic. And, we say as therapists that the universe kind of like calls in people who oftentimes are mirroring back to us things that we've been through as therapists, as personally, or things that we're going through. And sure as shit, I'm getting all these moms in my practice with neurodivergent kids, and they're exhausted and they're overwhelmed and they're confused and they feel alone and they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. And they're constantly having to advocate for all the resources at school and the 504 plans. And it's just, it's not what you think you're going to get when you have a kid. And it's not that we would trade our kids for anything. It's that all of these neural networks of an imagined life, we go into a state of shock and grief because all those things aren't going to happen that way. The family structure, not going to look the same way. The work structure and schedule, not going to look the same way, right? The finances and the budget, totally changing, because all these services are out of pocket. So I'm sharing this because it doesn't really matter if it's about having a neurodivergent child and not understanding, although I will talk about this in depth in future episodes for those of us that are figuring that out because it's not talked about enough. But any parent who has a child who is figuring something out that they didn't expect is going to have to use EMDR to help them understand what's happening now, what that means about sense of self, what that means about where to put old learning, what that means about what new learning to take in. And it's going to really EMDR in 2022 saved my life and helped me understand that all of the things I had imagined about the future weren't going to happen in that way. And I had to grieve a life that was no longer going to be available to me. I mean, really never was, but that's not how our brains work, right? Our brains imagine the future. And so when that doesn't happen, it's a death. It's a death of something that never existed. And I think as parents, we go through these mini deaths because our brains are designed to imagine the future based on the past and the present. That's just what our brains, and a lot of the times our brains do that. It's very, very helpful, right? If I know that my kids like certain things, or we vacation certain places that work for them or don't work for them, or I have certain structures that help me be a great mom and some that don't, my brain's going to give me and categorize that information to also help me imagine and pre-plan future things to make things faster, easier, and safer. Okay. So I think that as parents, we don't even give ourselves enough credit to understand that all of these things are happening in our brain every single day. And the complexity of learning here, it's so multidimensional. People really don't reflect back to us as parents that this is even happening to us. And so I want to be the one voice that you can listen to today. And maybe you share this episode with a friend. Maybe you have a friend who is having a parenting experience that they didn't expect it to feel this way. They didn't expect it to go this way. And they are feeling lost. They're feeling disoriented because all of the neural networks and mapping that they had planned out in the future and the past and the present, none of that makes sense right now. And this is traumatic. Okay. We talk about parenting as being really hard and challenging, but I'm just going to say it's traumatic because if that's the hook we need to get people who are parenting into EMDR therapy, I'll say whatever branding words we need to say, right? I'll say emotional resilience. I'll say trauma work. It doesn't really matter to me how we brand this and package this. I just know that as a parent, this has saved my life. It's made me a good enough mom for my kids. It's helped me understand my own negative and positive beliefs about my own childhood in terms of sense of self and safety to the world. And I think that if parents had the awareness that this was happening, and then they knew that EMDR was available to them to help them figure this out, we would have a very different parenting landscape. We would have parents walking around who had the belief of, I can figure things out. We would have parents walking around with the belief of, I'm good enough. We would have kids walking around with parents who felt like, I am lovable, I am safe. Because when a parent gets negatively triggered, kids under 5, they're going to go straight to negative beliefs of, I am shameful, I am bad, I'm unworthy of love. Just all the negative beliefs around defectiveness of self that we use in EMDR therapy targets. Okay. So this is a huge problem. And I'm going to be talking about this a ton because this is all I've been thinking about in my personal life, my personal therapy. And this is all I've been seeing in my therapy room, y'all, for like 7 years. Highly, highly functional, smart parents with the best intentions, with the most resources, coming in here, and I've done this in my own therapy, just sobbing, feeling completely lost. And just for all of us parents to have a framework that this is normal and you don't have to suffer through it. You can use EMDR to accelerate this process much faster. We can use EMDR to help you have a sense of past prong, present prong of time, future prong of time, so that your mind and body feel congruent through time. And also that we can help these hardworking adaptations, right? These parts of ourselves that are trying so hard to do it better, right? Like, I didn't have to buy my kids 6 pairs of shoes each when they were 2 or 3 years old. That's a lot of money. And if we as parents can understand that we're constantly overdeveloping parts of ourselves to pendulum swing and make up for things that have happened to us that we're not even consciously thinking about, we're going to parent in a much smarter, cleaner, lighter way, even if we're not conscious of it. So I hope this is helpful. I'm going to be talking about parenting a lot. I'm going to be talking a lot about parenting kids who are neurodivergent. We're talking a lot about just really like all the phases of parenting and motherhood, because really identity as a parent or as a mother starts well before our children actually are born into the world and connected with us. And there's so many different shapes and forms of what a parent is. Some of us don't have biological children. Some of us don't even have children that belong to us legally, but we have parent energy and nurturing energy for kids in our lives. There's just so many different variations on this, and I want to speak and honor each one, because my hope in doing this series is that whoever's listening can see themselves and feel in themselves what I'm describing is a normal parent experience, so that something will click and there's some kind of a connection for you to what I'm saying, so that you might think about yourself as a candidate for EMDR, right? I want you to put all the marketing around EMDRs for trauma, just put that over here. Y'all, someone just made that up because of research studies and because it sounds robust and important and because it does work for trauma. But EMDR is so much more than that. It's so much more expansive than what we give it credit for. And I'm here on this podcast every week trying to make sure that the people that need EMDR aren't just the ones that identify as people who have had trauma. Very few of us even realize we've had trauma, because the truth is everyone's had trauma. Everyone's had an experience where something's happened that shouldn't have happened. It's very subjective, right? Or something didn't happen that should have happened. So as always, I hope this is helpful. I'm going to be getting personal in this series, you guys, because I think it's important that I not just talk about research or not just talk about themes in my clinical work or themes from all the consultation I do with consultees, but I want this to feel like there's an emotional connection for you to really inspire you to get the support that you need, because parenting is no joke. Parenting is the hardest job in the world. So with that being said, it's been a delight and an honor to be able to talk about and think about this with you. And I will look forward to continuing the conversation next week here on the Zero Disturbance podcast. If you have not already signed up for our mailing list, please do so. We have so many free resources. We have a client resource library for those of you who are thinking about, your own healing and your own wellness. And we also have wonderful resources for all therapists as well to help them with their clients and think a little differently to help people who might not identify as having had trauma. So with all that being said, y'all, please take care. Look forward to connecting next time. Be well.